I am Aliette Mousnier-Lompre. I work in Orange. I am in charge of the operations for our B2B division. In short, it means that my team is delivering and operating solutions for enterprise customers all around the world. It's a team of project managers, field engineers, software developers, supply chain or cybersecurity specialists. There are about 8,500 staff spread across 100 countries. I'm a former soccer player and I love soccer metaphors. Once soccer players are on the field, players are the ones taking their decisions. They don't call the coach to ask whether they need to pass the ball on the right or on the left. And some teams are specifically known to have this ability to come back in a difficult game when everything seems to be lost. They know what they have to do, they believe in themselves, they trust each other, and they are able to change the tactic of the team easily to reconfigure depending on the situation in the game. A company like Orange is like a small society. And while we progress in our own internal digital transformation, there are major changes occurring in terms of relationships between people, pace of work, information sharing, power dynamics, and so on. It's like a mirror of what's happening in the society at large, as our political systems are deeply challenged by the rise of internet, social networks, and giant digital platforms. In a big company like Orange, we've seen across the last 15 years a big acceleration of information flows, innovation cycles, and business pace in general. This overall acceleration, coupled with the globalization trend, makes it totally impossible and even illusory for executives to try to control everything from the top in a centralized manner. If we want to be able to constantly adapt, cope with change, take quick relevant decisions, we need to give room for maneuver to the field. We need information to be distributed at all times rather than in a sparse and top-down mode. And crises are magnifying glasses of the strengths and weaknesses of our organization systems. When crisis started, it quickly became very obvious that we don't have all the answers and all the inputs we need when we have to take a critical decision. And this is true at any time, as we live in a complex system anyway. But very often we have this illusion that we master all the variables in the equation before taking a decision, which is not true. There are lots of assumptions and risk-taking. It has been also very obvious throughout this coronavirus crisis that we could not properly and efficiently steer the crisis responses in a purely central mode. We are in a very fast-changing environment with very diverse government responses and health situations. My team is located in 100 countries. It makes no sense to have a bunch of people in the headquarters in Paris making all the decisions. It would be irrelevant and terribly slow. But all of this needs to be prepared. If you want quick, relevant, and adaptive decision-making on the ground, you need to get the right culture around empowerment, the right psychological safety, the right information sharing flows, a very strong and shared purpose and clear aligned direction. You also need to have people knowing what is their clear role and area of responsibility. If ownerships are vague, you'll be in trouble, definitely. And all of this get prepared, built across the years. It's not something you would suddenly decide because you move to crisis mode. It's about making sure that every day, by your actions, you reinforce the principles you believe in. Coming back to the empowerment criticality, we've had for years very strong heads of sites in our major service centers. They exactly know what they have to do, and more importantly, they know they are in charge. They all defined their own plan to progressively ramp up to the 100% home working scenario. And at some point, there were problems. Here, it was clear that we needed new scenarios. And many of our sites had never tested the 100% home working scenario. And many teams, like our 24/7 service desks, had never worked from home in Delhi, Cairo, Mauritius or Rio. Internally, it was not 100% smooth. In that case, you're in a moment of truth. If you go back to your team and tell them you don't want them to fail again, that in that case you're pretty sure that when the actual crisis happens, you'll never be ready. In the end, it's essential to create the psychological safety that is needed when the situation becomes really difficult, to make sure people will trust they will be supported, to make sure people will not be afraid to make mistakes, because for sure there will be mistakes. The Orange Group culture has been a major asset throughout the COVID crisis. We have this very strong heritage of civil service and public utility. Of course, we run a business, but we have a sense of greater purpose around making sure that we fuel the positive societal impact of the digital transformation and that we are very responsible in preventing its risks. The crisis surged, and when the team realized that we were very often the main vital link enabling our customers to keep on operating, there was a tremendous wave of mobilization across the staff. Even those who were facing very difficult personal circumstances, they were just up to the challenge. The sense of purpose and the pride to work in the team has never been so high. I'm used to telling to my team that a bad decision is better than no decision at all. Indeed, when we face a complex situation and where we are not exactly sure what to decide, we are always tempted in the day-to-day routine of our professional lives to sit down and postpone the decision. Just wait and see what happens. Wait to think about it and gather more information, to get opinions and advice from people around us. Sometimes it works and problems get fixed by themselves. But most of the time, we are just wasting time and wasting an opportunity to test a solution and learn. In a crisis like the COVID crisis we are dealing with at the moment, you cannot afford to wait. You have to decide to send all your staff at home, you have to decide how you'll keep on operating or not, you have to decide what to tell your customers. In Orange Business Services, we had hundreds of enterprise customers coming to us in the first days of the shutdown decisions, asking for network upgrades for their call centers, for instance, or for their home working solutions. They were asking for new digital collaboration solutions, asking for enhanced cybersecurity protection. There were some vital emergencies, literally, when we had to serve hospitals, emergency health services, or governments. In that case, you have no choice but to take quick decisions and move forward. It can be very uncomfortable as you don't have all the proper information to take those decisions. You are in a very fast-moving environment and you don't read the future. You do not know what will work and what will not. But clearly sticking your head under the sand like an ostrich is not an option. There, you need a clear compass from a personal and company purpose standpoint. You have no procedure, no predefined process to help you. Let's take one example. We have approximately 1,400 staff in Mauritius. The great majority of them had never done any home working before. It was not even allowed. On March 18th, the health minister in Mauritius communicated to the press that there was no COVID case in Mauritius. Few minutes later, the Prime Minister communicated to the press again that there were 3 cases in the country. 1 hour later, the Prime Minister announced that the airport and the schools were closed until further notice. The next day, on March 19th, in the evening, a very hard country lockdown was decided. There started to be a panic among the population. People were afraid that they could not even feed their families as all the shops, including for food, were about to be closed. We were able to guarantee people were properly protected. We repeatedly told people we wanted them to stay at home. Everybody knew that even if they couldn't work from home for any reason, we would support them. And they knew that they would keep on being paid in any case. All of this did not distract the team from their duty to support our customers who desperately needed support. On the contrary, there was a tremendous mobilization. Another very important aspect worth noticing in the Mauritius case is that the full plan was steered locally. There is no way we could have done that from the headquarters in Paris. There was no playbook and they handled the situation superbly. What happened is that the local IT team installed on all desktops remote access applications and asked employees to go home with their desktops. They organized the transport of our staff that was still in the building at night to make sure that they could go back home safely. They also organized taxi services to allow volunteers to go back to the office during the night in order to pick up the desktop and go back at home with it. So if you look at this type of situation and think about what makes a difference, I mentioned empowerment with clear accountabilities and ownership. Make sure as a leader that you grow leaders around you, that people in your team are clear about what they have to do, what are their areas of accountabilities, and make sure you delegate decisions as close as possible to the field. Another aspect is that you need to have a clear compass in terms of values and stick to it. Orange is a very protective company for its employees. We actually care, and we prove it by facts. As Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." And lastly, it's absolutely critical to make sure that everyone understands the stakes and the big picture, to explain what we know, what we don't know, and what we try to achieve together. And all of this needs to be rooted in your company culture and day-to-day mindset. That's not something you declare overnight while you're in crisis. Orange Business Services provides connectivity and digital services to enterprise customers. We connect workers, whether they are blue collars and white collars. We provide them with solutions so that they can do their job better in the office, in a plant, in an airport, wherever they are. And we have this strong sense of purpose, trying every day in everything we do to make a positive contribution to society, being very mindful about the environmental or societal impact of what we do, whether we talk about data privacy, about stakes around the digital divide, the future of artificial intelligence, and many other sensitive topics. Throughout this COVID crisis, it has been so obvious that we had a key positive contribution to bring, that helping our customers to maintain their own operations and helping them to connect their employees from home would be a strong contribution to keep the economy afloat. And again, we were crystal clear in our priorities throughout the crisis management. We did not prioritize customers based on revenue or internal-driven KPIs. Right from the start, we told everyone internally that we would put on the top of the list hospitals, health emergency units, governments, energy or water suppliers, food retail, enterprises. That was our first and foremost priority, to upgrade, secure, support all those vital stakeholders being frontline in the crisis management at societal level. We all want to feel we are part of a community. We want to feel we are in the same boat all together, that we share the same experience. It requires to share our emotions and to have leaders showing empathy. In this respect, some said that countries with the most adequate COVID response had in common that they were ruled by women leaders. Was the case with Angela Merkel in Germany, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, but also cases of Taiwan, Denmark, Iceland. Sometimes the comments were even involuntarily sexist, because those leaders have been successful not because they are women, but because they are competent. But clearly, all of this showed that the high level of competence is also derived from the high level of empathy those leaders demonstrated when taking decisions and also communicating upon them. For instance, one major challenge among many others people who are confined are facing at the moment has been to combine working from home while taking care of children. I am myself mother of 2 children, and I can pretty well relate to it. I felt it was important to show everybody that I understood their uneasiness, and at the same time that the company does not expect everybody to be at 100% all the time, especially when we are not in a business as usual mode. I told my staff several times that it was difficult for me to take care of the children while working all day. There were several occasions when my kids even popped up in the middle of video calls with customers, and there was even one day when I was precisely mentioning this topic of managing home working with kids, when my 3-year-old daughter arrived in the room and she started to cry in the middle of the audio conference with all my top managers. She had untangled a comb in her hair and she was so worried she could never remove it. She was desperate. I helped her to remove it, and in the end it was quite a funny moment. Again, you need to prove by facts that you really believe in the core values and principles you are pushing, and that you are the first one applying them. Once you have a clear direction and the right decision-making decentralization, you need to make sure you have also the right information flows and collaboration. All of this is very much linked to the level of trust you have in your organization. It is built over time, but it is strengthened in time of crisis when people feel that the core values and principles of the company are fully respected and are even our prime compass. If people have this sense that we care for them, they will immediately be willing to care for others. It was so noticeable at the beginning of the turmoil that people in the team wanted to help each other. They even needed it. We started to look at how we could support those who wanted to help. And in a few days, we had a task force established at group level. And in about 1 week, a new platform called Let Me Help was born. We made it available to all our staff in Orange Business Services. And the idea has been very basic. This is an open and decentralized platform where anyone whose activity has slowed down because of the lockdown can volunteer to help their colleagues that, on the contrary, had their workload increased very highly to respond to the crisis. A few weeks after its launch, more than 300 volunteers within the company have found a mission that they can support. Feedbacks have been very positive. Participants say that they are happy to take part of this initiative, to feel that they can really be useful in a crucial moment. There is also a very positive side effect. They are learning new skills, and because of their mission, they are often talking more with our customers. When building the platform, we decided to trust our employees. We decided to reduce at the minimum all validations from the management and to trust that people will continue to do what they had to do and to ensure their previous job even when engaged in another mission. Again, you need to prove by facts that you really believe in the core values and principles you are pushing and that you are the first one applying them. There's a quote that I like very much from a French movie maker saying that an idiot who is walking will always go further than an intellectual who is seated. Sometimes I have the impression that we live in a world where it's so easy to react or comment on anything, most of the time negatively or even aggressively. We see that every day on the social networks. A world where it is becoming more and more difficult to find people ready to actually act to try to change things for the better. Personally, I'm convinced it's very important to take action and responsibility. If you are playing in a team and are on the sports field, you cannot just comment on what your teammates are doing and hide yourself when the ball is arriving on your side of the field. It means that you have to accept that you will fail sometimes, and it's clearly difficult. It's quite popular to say that we have the right to fail and that we should be even happy to fail and celebrate our failures. I must confess that I'm not very at ease with this way of looking at things. I don't know many people that are happy to fail and who celebrate their failures, but maybe I'm just too French. Yet, I deeply believe that when we do mistakes, and of course we do, we should reflect and learn from them. And I'm also a strong believer in the test and learn mindset. I always try, as a manager, to emphasize to my team when we are not so sure about the approach we should take, that we will experiment something. It's totally different from being sure that something will work and then being miserably failing. It's about acknowledging that we are not sure about the outcomes of a given choice and agreeing that we will review them together and potentially decide to change our decision. I have found that acknowledging from the very beginning that something new we are initiating is so-called experimentation or is a test makes a big difference for everyone. It can be about a decision on a given business topic or a different way of working or a different setup in the team. At the beginning, you need to openly call this approach experimentation and be very explicit about it. And then the more you do it, the more it just becomes the standard way of running your activity. What I have observed is that the so-called experimentation framework decreases the pressure we are used to putting ourselves upon our shoulders, considering we do not have the right to fail, and which is very often paralyzing. And of course, sometimes it's hard. Hard to admit we do mistakes, that everything is not perfect, that we have a lot to learn. Learning also means accepting to change habits, to change convictions. Many people, many managers wish others to change. They want to learn how to do change management, how to change the behavior of their employees. The list is often very long. Employees should be more engaged, more agile, take more initiatives, take more risks, and so on. Personally, I prefer to focus on what I can bring as a positive change to my environment, to reflect on what I can change in my own approach to go one step further, and hopefully then inspire others. As Gandhi said, trying to be the change you want to see in the world, even if it's a very tiny change and that we go step by step. Let's take an example. For instance, I have tested several formats for our managers' calls in the past months. We have approximately once a quarter a call with our 800 managers in the team to just gather everyone, share news, realign the common vision and objectives. It used to be very top-down. People would be listening to various speakers over the phone for 1 hour. At some point, I had feedback from some people in the team that the format was not fully appropriate. Such feedback was done very gently and politely, but it was more or less saying, your calls are boring, you talk too much, and people are doing emails. So I tried to collect insight about what people would actually like to hear in those calls, and we also discussed the format of the calls with the team. Very quickly, we came to the conclusion that we needed much more interactivity. I asked a few people to design something new that could allow much more open interactions and room for spontaneity. The team was enthusiastic about the concept, but they were really concerned that it would not work. They had this bad experience of opening a Q&A session on an audio bridge and no one asking questions because people tend to be too shy to ask questions in front of a big crowd. And they were really worried that it would simply not work and that we would end with no questions and an empty call. Basically, they were worried we would fail. All of this is proving that still we have a long way to go to have a real test and learn mindset in the team and also a full open relationship and dialogue between managers and employees. But this being said, once I made it very clear that we would experiment and that it was okay if we were failing, that it would be just one bad call or weird moment with no questions, but that it would be fine. Once I said that, people were much more relaxed and ready to take risks to try something new. We went for a full session with live Q&A where people could ask anonymous questions through an online tool, and it worked very well. It was just a big success. And actually, the fact that it was a success does not really matter in that case. But what really matters in that case is that people felt entitled to take some risks and to try something totally different. If we look at the starting point of this very basic anecdote, all of this started with a constructive feedback from some people in the team. People who felt confident enough to tell me that our managers' calls were just not good enough. This point is absolutely key. To learn from mistakes, to always improve, or just to balance your own biases or ignorance, it's essential to have people around you that are really sharing what they think and who are challenging you. And clearly, the upper you are in the pyramid, the less people are actually openly sharing their mind with you. They tend to tell you what you want to hear, which can be very dangerous. I'm trying to fight against these risks every day, and I'm having various strategies to do so. One basic option is to constantly ask others to express their views before you do, so that you make sure your team is not aligning their recommendations with the one of the boss. In meetings, it's sometimes a personal challenge for me. I like to speak up freely, but imposing yourself to ask open questions before giving your own view is very effective. It can be specifically challenging for women to behave that way, because we are taught so much that we should be more confident, that we should speak up more loudly, that we should not be shy. But being the last one to share one's view has nothing to do with a lack of confidence or assertiveness. It can, on the contrary, be very powerful. But of course, it works only if people know that you'll be ready to change your mind if the team's feedback is not what you expected. Otherwise, again, they will quickly know that there's no point for them to openly share their views, and they will tell you what they think you want to hear. It requires being very honest and transparent on what you've already decided and what is open for discussion. I always try to be very explicit about what is already decided on my side and what is really open for debate. And the more important the stakes are, the more explicit I try to be. It also requires paying attention to the well-known confirmation bias that will push you to look only for the signs proving that you made the right decisions. It also requires hiring people who have the strengths of character, but also very different backgrounds and ways of thinking compared to mine, and who won't be afraid to speak up and to tell me that they disagree with my ways of doing things. I've always liked to have strong personalities in my teams, and it's one of my prime criteria when I recruit someone to join the team, to make sure that I'm not recruiting someone who will just say yes to everything I'm suggesting.